Hey, welcome everyone to this session of Crucial Talking Points, number 10 for the series. Today, we're exploring remote first work cultures. So globally, we've gotten used to working from home. What started out as something of a temporary measure is probably becoming the norm. Pushing it a little bit further, we are seeing people are not only adjusting to this culture, but are embracing it. In transitioning to a remote work, how will things change? Is remote work one of the solutions to solving the tech talent crunch? How will SMEs adopt to the change? We have a slew of tech products to enable remote work, but are those enough? Joining me on these sessions are speakers who have, lots of experience in remote work. First, we have Vikram Bharati, founder of Draper Startup House. He originally comes from LA, California, and what was supposed to be a 6-month sabbatical that turned into a 2-year solo backpacking around the world. That brought him to settle down in Singapore, and he started a hospitality company called Tribe Theory, which later rebranded to Draper's Startup House. Next, we have Charompan, co-founder and CEO of Harbour Thailand, which is Thailand's largest startup platform. It provides a variety of programs, network, funding, and workspace to help aspiring Thai founders to launch businesses that people love and help major corporations to innovate with real results. Next, we have Dan Van Rossum, the CEO of Gymplex Vietnam. In his role, he is responsible for researching, designing, and delivering the workplace of the future and ensure it helps companies with their key challenges to attract, to engage, and to retain the best talent in the market. Prior to joining Gymplex, Dan ran his well-being startup called Bright, which followed a 9-year engagement with Ogilvy, for which he worked as a regional strategy and innovation director across the Amsterdam, New York, Chicago, Singapore, and Ho Chi Minh city offices. And that's why he's in Vietnam.
You guys see me?
No.
Yes.
Oh, now we can.
Yes. Hello.
And of course, we have Pin Logindaku, who is the founding partner of Lightspeed Southeast Asia, the Southeast Asian arm of global early stage investment fund, Lightspeed Venture Partners. Prior to joining Lightspeed, and that's where I got to know her, she was at Insignia Venture Partners and Tiger Global Management, where her focus was on consumer and financial technology across Southeast Asia, India, and China. So welcome to series number 10 of Crucial Talking Points. Okay, the rest of the guys, did y'all see it?
Yeah.
We saw a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Just a tiny bit. But hey, Pin, nice haircut. You cut your hair.
I did.
It looks nice.
Oh, I cut my own hair. Yeah, in Bangkok. Yeah.
So,
Bobby
what do you
doesn't need to
think?
cut his hair. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I actually do have to shave.
Okay.
I have to shave like every 3-4 days. Yeah, despite not having any visible hair, I do need to do that. Yeah. So
you have all the downside, none of the upside. That's tragic.
Yeah, so I can't complain about messy hair, but still I need to keep it tight and short, literally. Yeah, so that video basically showed us what the future possibly could be, and we are here today. What do you guys think? Would things be so drastic to that level?
Yeah.
Anyone just jump in. Yeah.
I said I don't think so. I think it will be more of a somewhere in between, based on my own experience and my team. I mean, everyone in my team is dying to meet a human being. So I mean, virtual environment actually can allow you to, feel, body contact, or even, or get to almost like and smell and, understand body language, then, people still, long for that stuff. But of course, no one in my team is going to go back doing the 9 to 5, 5 days a week. That's for sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. What do other, people think?
How do you see the changes?
Yeah, Bobby, if I could, well, I guess it depends on sort of like what time frame you're looking at, because I think remote work has clearly been a part of the work culture for a very long time. It's not a new phenomena. Clearly, it has accelerated, in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. But remote work has always been there since technology has enabled it, but in sort of like different phases. But I guess if you look back, 50 years or 100 years or 10 years, it depends on the time frame. But I think there's a lot of writing that has been done on the future of, I guess, just work and the world. And the sort of the writing that comes to my mind is, there's like the science fiction novel Snow Crash, which I think is it's a book that a lot of tech companies read. In fact, I think when you join Facebook, they give you Snow Crash to read, or they used to, because it's sort of like a science fiction novel about how the world's going to look like in the future. And it's very, very metaverse, very digital. The interactions are very, very much, VR and futuristic. But I think it's not hard to imagine a world like that, because clearly we're sort of going towards that directions very quickly. I think in a world like that, remote work is just going to be just work, I suppose. So that's a very long time frame. But I think this remote work culture is accelerating faster than we had ever imagined. And at Draper Startup House, I mean, the example that I use is, we have 45 employees in 15 countries, and I haven't seen anyone in 2 years, and we're all working remotely. So, and I've become used to it, and it's becoming more, we're becoming acclimated, and we're becoming a lot more used to it. So clearly, remote work is here to stay, and it's only going to get accelerated.
Guys?
Well, I am surely not hoping for that world to come, but that one where everyone's just talking out in avatar. I think it's very sad and impersonal, unfortunately. But my bet is that part of the work that we do will probably be virtual or remote, like calls with clients that used to happen in person. I think a lot of them can be just virtual. I just think about sales calls, right? Maybe the first 5 calls, it's all virtual, and then the one last call to just close the deal is still in person. I think within teams, I think people are going to probably, hopefully, start to be a lot more flexible. Maybe one week a day, sort of things. People work from home. I think it's good. It's also very practical for companies, right, in terms of space management and this and that. So, or maybe certain functions like administrative functionality can be remote to help save cost, and with very little impact on the business. Yeah, but I'm definitely not looking forward, and I don't think we'll all go be virtual avatars. Yeah.
So we won't have this discussion anytime soon. Just staring at a bunch of avatars and like people virtually listening in. I think one of the questions to ask too is, when we talk about remote work, is remote from what, right? Because we are where we are, so we're always working where we're working, right? So remote still talks about this idea of kind of like a centralized office somewhere where everyone comes every single day. I think if you would listen to the employees, the people actually coming to the office and having a choice, they probably wouldn't make that choice, right? They probably wouldn't choose to be in the office. I do think it probably changes a bit, both in demographic and also in markets. Market, because not in every market, like in Vietnam is like a really good example, Bobby, as you know, up in Hanoi, a really good example of a place where people just don't have any facilities to be working from home. Very difficult for them to get their work done. Actually, we just ran a survey with young Vietnamese about what did they hate most about working from home. And number one is distractions, right? Because typically you're sitting at the kitchen table with your hopefully company issued laptop, while like 3 generations of family members are running around you. That's not, the place to be sitting while you're trying to get your work done. And I think both generational and kind of also in terms of like, where are you in your career? Vikram was just talking about he hasn't seen his team in 2 years, but if he was a fresher just coming out of university, would that really be possible for you to start a job knowing nothing about the workforce, nothing about how companies work, and just start remote or start from home? So there's a lot of things where it's still, I think, required in a way to have places and spaces to go to, but I think the role of those spaces will change, and therefore also the nature, the design of those spaces will change a lot.
Okay. So of course, I don't think it's still going to be quite way down distance where we're going to experience something like Ready Player One or Metaverse or whatever you call it, right? But somewhere in between, right? The adjustment to remote work. What does that mean? I mean, I remember a friend who used to work in San Francisco before. They were given a day of the week to work from home, and at that point in time, so that was before this 1 day a week. So that was before this whole pandemic, right? So, and that was to help them save costs. As you know, in San Francisco, transportation, everything else is really expensive, right? But then now, you have a situation whereby people actually do not want to go to the office and they want to relocate to somewhere else to work remotely. Do you see that becoming the norm? And how is that affecting, for example, you guys, who operate spaces? Anyone, just pick it up.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. So I can give you a little bit of a glimpse into what we're facing now as a space operator, workspace operator. So back in 2020, we hit our first wave in Bangkok around end of February, and the city went on lockdown and our space was closed. By July, we came out of the first wave, and business back to normal, 70%, 60%. At that point, our occupancy would drop down to 20%, and yes, we're still doing much better than people in the hospitality sector. They're doing like 1 to 3% occupancy rate, right? But by the time we hit our second wave, so that's like late December, before that, the occupancy went up to 80%. So it actually, there's a big resurgence. So that's a good sign. However, the people who came back, they don't want to come and work every day, their office. They want to come and work like 3 days a week, even if they rent their own private offices. That's been the trend so far. So I think people still need a place to work, but it's not just the old way of working. When they come in, it's more meaningful. It's like an event. They plan out a day, what they're gonna do together. It's more like team building too, right? They make the most out of it that day that they come together, and then they they go back to their home. They work from home, and then they do their own stuff. So I think remote work is a combination of yes, you're working alone, but yes, the company also need to have a very strong working process. And if you're onboarding people remotely, that onboarding process needs to be 10 times better than used to. because you need to make sure that people who never see each other can feel connected in some way, right? And then when they come together, they're no stranger. And then the HR will have to be more community building, and more people focused. Make sure that when people come to the office, it's not just you do your own work, I do my own work. It's become more of an event kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I can sort of look at it from the perspective of spaces, I think it's very difficult to make a judgment now, because I think it's still early, and as you can see, a lot of companies around the world are still struggling with making the decisions of sort of what balance of remote work versus being in office. Every company has different views on it, and everyone's trying to really figure out the right balance, because clearly it's going to be a balance between remote work and in office. I think that's yet to play out, but I just think it's about conditioning. And a lot of times when we talk about remote work, it's really from our perspective, because we have been conditioned to working in an office, and now we are getting conditioned to working remotely. So it's very hard for us to sort of look at what the scenarios could be of people who are just entering the workforce, or people who will be entering the workforce 5 years from now. A 21-year-old person entering the workforce in 2025 is going to have very different conditioning, because that student is going to have probably studied half of his or her career remotely. And so that conditioning is going to make it a lot more normalized. So I think from that perspective of someone else entering the workforce on a more remote basis, it's not hard to imagine that there's going to be a huge new generation of people coming into the workforce who are going to be conditioned to working remote first. So I think the jury is still out, but clearly the balance certainly is tipping towards remote work, even though it's not what I want either. Like, I don't want to be Ready Player One and working in talking to an avatar. But I think eventually the economics of a remote work is so powerful that ultimately it's going to drive a lot of decision making. And so I don't think we should look at remote work as a pure remote work kind of landscape, because there's so many different things involved in the decisioning of remote work. Clearly, there's productivity and economics, and also preferences. People now that can work remotely can actually travel more, work from anywhere in the world. So there's going to be clearly preferences that are going to change, which may not be our preference. It'll be the preference of someone who is 18 today joining the workforce in a few years. So the dynamics, I think, are so much more powerful towards remote work that I just don't see how the balance is not going to tip towards a lot more towards remote work.
So Dan, I kind of know Gymplex fairly well, right? And we have collaborated on a few things over the last few years. And while the concept of Gymplex is basically to allow your members or your clients to afford that flexibility of work, right? Instead of being housed at one place, right? So that they're able to hire people from different parts of Vietnam as well, or at least for now it's Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, right? Do you see? So I guess you were trying to make a case of that, but I suppose this period of lockdown or pandemics, whatever, sort of, has that improved your narrative to your clients?
Yeah, I think, Bobby, COVID has hurt us and helped us. I think hurt us because in the short term, similar to what Charles was talking about in terms of the occupancy rates, obviously not a lot of people coming into the office. There are companies who are very heavily impacted, financially very heavily impacted. That obviously impacts us as well. Then on the other side, I think the narrative has been helped a lot by COVID. Because now companies, last year we only had, for context, right, in Vietnam, we've only had 2 weeks of lockdown last year. That was it. We were doing really, really well. Now, not so much, right? So this is the first time we're actually in an extended lockdown. And so this means that there's now a chance for companies to really see, what is it like for employees to fully work from home for an extended period of time, and how do we then make that work for the company, right, and for the employees. And so then obviously the idea of, I think it's actually usually beneficial to us, because the whole idea about work and flexibility now will become much more mainstream. I've had a couple of conversations actually over the lockdown with companies of hundreds or thousands of employees who are now really saying for the first time, does it still make sense for me to run my own office? Does it still make sense for me to bring everyone to the same place every single day? And typically in Vietnam, that also then means fingerprint scanner in the morning, fingerprint scanner out in the afternoon. Does it make sense? And the answer is starting to become no, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all to have this one spot that everyone has to come to. So what does make sense? And again, we have to go back to the point that companies are just a group of people, and it's a very competitive marketplace in Vietnam for great talent. So if you want to get the best people to come work for you, you need to offer what they want, right? And what they want is flexibility. What they want is choice. So then, of course, this network that we're building of all these different spaces that people can use, within what their company allows them to, is going to be a big benefit. So I totally see it helping in the long run, late this year, early next year. Believe that it's totally going to be the way that companies will go.
All right, so we'll just sort of stick to sort of the tech sector for now. I guess all of us are more familiar with that. So in your case, Pin, as you look into your portfolio companies or looking into companies who to invest in, right? How do you see this affecting your investment decision in relation to hiring of talents?
Yeah, actually, I think it's great for portfolio companies, especially those in Southeast Asia who has we're short on technical talent mostly, right? And for a long while, because we didn't believe, there was a belief that it's better if everybody is in the same spot, and it's hard to coordinate across. But once this kind of Pandora's box of, hey, you actually can be quite productive, opened up, we're definitely seeing a lot more portfolio companies thinking about opening hubs, or even just working, hiring fully remote technical team. The engineer can be sitting out in Ukraine, can be doing, in SF hours. I think it's great for us, especially in this region where culturally we also kind of like more FaceTime. I think things have just changed, hopefully for a lot of people. So, and then the other thing is, I also feel, I'm also hopeful that you allow more people to participate in the economy, right? Like, women, working moms, right, who just want to do part-time and not, want to be in the out suburbs with their kids. Right now they have options to work remotely. People who want to run their own small freelancing shop, they don't want to work for someone else full-time because they freelance. They can freelance from anywhere, from co-working spaces to their own home to a chateau in France. So I think that's also pretty good in general. Yeah, so I really don't see too much negative here, at least for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just to jump on one point, what Kun Pin just mentioned, I think that is so interesting, right? That idea of, for example, working moms. If you have more flexibility in when and where and how you work, you actually make it much more equitable. So you actually allow for people to say, well, I would not have been able to, for example, return to the workforce, as we've seen a couple of examples. But now that I can choose to work from 8 to 12 and from 3 to 5 and then pick up some work later on, and I don't have to physically appear in a place where I have to maybe like run home or go to a mother's room or something like that, that's hugely beneficial, and that truly makes work much more equitable. So I thought that was a really great point to kind of hear about some of the other maybe kind of like unmentioned opportunities that this brings.
So okay. It's been in the news whereby companies are having a hard time hiring people or retaining them And one of the conditions for hiring right now is that the companies need to offer remote work, right? Of course, we the sheer size of the US, you kind of understand why, right? Or, in a long period of time, a lot of people actually have sort of migrated out of San Francisco into other states, and now to expect them to come back, that's a little bit of a big move right there. Do you see that happening in Southeast Asia? Do you think Southeast Asians, or in this region for the matter, or Asian region, okay, we are more willing to move to that city of work, or will employers be more forgiving and tolerable on such expectation?
Yeah. Sorry, Charles, I think you wanted to say.
No, you can go first. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it really depends on what industry you're in. If you're a hedge fund and people are trading, it's you kind of want everyone to be sort of a little bit more close. You don't want a trader who is, so I think it depends on what industry you're in. But I think in general, I think it's a net benefit, as Penn mentioned, that the workforce is a lot more remote because there's more diversity, there's more inclusiveness, and that you can, if you're a global company, it makes it a lot easier. However, I would say though, so one of the businesses we do is we do tech outsourcing, and we provide that as a service. And we have a network of tech development houses around the world: South America, Eastern Europe, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, etc. And we're seeing that the margins of tech development is actually compressing, where in the past, if you got a developer from Ukraine, you could pay them a lot less and you would have a much higher margin. But we're seeing that those margins are actually really, really compressing, and they're going to continue to compress because a good developer in Ukraine, now that everyone can kind of work remotely, can actually charge a much higher rate than they could 5 years ago. And I think similarly, we're seeing these trends happen even in like Vietnam. The best developers, if they speak good, they can communicate well, they're really good developers, their prices and rates are going up. And so as these margins compress, work like tech development, which used to be a lot beneficial for companies to outsource it to different cheaper countries, is slowly starting to disappear. So, if you're a tech company in Europe or in the US, eventually you're probably going to end up hiring people who are in the US or in Europe, who are sort of closer to you, because the prices don't really matter that much, and you kind of want to have that ability to sort of communicate in the same time zone, etc. So it really depends on what industry you're in.
Yeah, definitely. If you're a tech team and your company is doing something that's really dealing with sensitive data, you gotta house your own server in-house kind of thing. You need to come into the office, at least a tech team. However, I can speak for a lot of the large company in Thailand because I work a lot with them. Between the pandemic, some of them actually downsizing their office by like 70%, right? So 70% of their team they're sent home, and they told me that it's here to stay this way. And the space that now available, they actually lease it out to other company, startup kind of thing. And some of these companies, they have one of the most cool-ish office in Thailand. So it's in the news, and people visit it. It's beautiful, and they still let that go. So I feel like in the past, Asian country feel like having a nice office is like a prestige kind of thing, but that now something they don't really care so much about. It's all cost saving mode, and people don't think they need to look good by having a good office, nice office. And the cost that they save is massive. Some of these companies are spending up to $300 per employee per month just to house that one employee. Just imagine how much they can save if they have like 1,000 employees a month, right? So I mean, it's win-win. I think a lot of the tech savvy company in Thailand, they need to generally be a tech company, just company that's really want to push digital transformation, will adopt this and become more flexible to future employee. Yeah.
But that's the whole point, right? I think that's exactly, Charles. I mean, you're talking about there's a huge win-win, because if companies can downsize their offices, they don't need these like huge offices anymore, right?
Yeah.
And then employees want to work more from home, so that's the win-win. But I don't think that therefore like a prestigious office or like a really attractive office will go away. There will just be a different requirement for it, which I think why in our industry, obviously, as we're talking here today, there's this huge benefit, because we can now say you can still have your town hall space, you can still have your huge training rooms, you can still have your event space, you can still have private offices, hot desk, etc. You just don't have to pay for it anymore, because you only pay for it when you use it in a shared complex with different other companies that all have reduced to 30% of their previous capacity. So you just keep the space that you need for yourself every single day. And that could be, let's say, for some companies we're talking to, that could be like 100 hot desks, right? They're kind of running kind of like a mini co-working space. And then all the other facilities that otherwise would have been on your footprint that you're paying for 24/7, right, per square meter, is now something that's shared. Like everything else now in life is in the sharing economy. So I think that's exactly where we still need to develop really, really attractive offices. It's just not going to belong to one company anymore. So we have this one project going up hopefully we're starting next month with construction pending the current lockdown. We're basically building a huge campus, like a Googleplex type kind of campus. But instead of, again, for one company, it's just for a set of companies, kind of taking some of the elements of co-working, but marrying it with what did companies previously found really attractive about traditional offices, which is their own part of that is still fully custom designed. It's fully private. They're not sitting in glass boxes where people walking around can peer into their offices. It doesn't feel like they haven't grown up enough to afford their own office. So I think it's more like merging the two models and playing on what they would want. And yeah, cost savings are then a huge part of it. And then plus what Bobby was just saying, you don't just have that, but then you also have access to all these other spaces across the city, even in other cities. And I don't know if you guys saw the big contract that the US government just did, where they worked with 5 partners, including Liquid Space and WeWork, that now allow any government worker within a certain kind of like sector, they can now use any co-working space near them. They basically get a flex credit and they can choose what office they want to go to, right? So all of that combined is just like, it will still be there. It will just be on demand. It will be more like a platform rather than one big physical space.
Yeah.
How is that going to change then? How is that going to change then the traditional real estate, commercial real estate sector? Do you see a seismic? Do you see a seismic change, or do you see this is just a below 10% change?
Coming from the startup world and then going into real estate, I've gotten to know it as probably one of the slowest industries to change. So I don't think it's going to change overnight. But you see it in certain markets where all of a sudden, what was previously really considered a flexible lease, like a 1 to 2 year lease, has now become mainstream, right? You look in like Hong Kong, there's so many big buildings where the standard lease term is now 1 year. So I think like they will have to follow at some point. I think, again, the two worlds will just grow closer to each other, because the other part is also about traditional real estate. You see it with all the big new developments in Singapore, but also like in London, New York, all these like places, that they're going to be much more amenity driven. It's much more about what's the concept of this building, what common spaces are in there, how will it support my well-being, why is it an exciting place to go to? You look at 22 Bishopsgate, a really big project in London. It's number one is about amenities, about hospitality, about F&B, and then you get into okay, what part do I lease, and do I lease it in a long-term lease or in a kind of more flexible lease? But I do think everything will have to follow at some point, and real estate will have to change. But it's a slow industry to move.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you, Dan. we've been getting a lot of requests from large company, more so than before COVID, and it's weird. And they want co-working for some reason, because they don't want to rent out traditional office and design and build out themselves anymore, but they want their own space. So
and they want the space, but also I think, again, this is now becoming very cliche term, but we live in a VUCA world. We couldn't have predicted last year what would happen this year. So how can you commit to anything for 5 or 10 years, besides marriage? I mean, you don't know what's going to happen in the world. So you cannot sign that 5 to 10 year lease and pay for this huge fit out, not knowing what's going to happen like 2-3 years from now. So that demand for flexibility will 100% be there.
Well, I think the shortened lease was the real estate market taking advantage of the rise in rentals, rather than being locked down for 5 years. But then little did they know that this is actually going to, whether by design or otherwise, that now is the norm. And you boys who are running co-working spaces are coming in, taking over spaces, to creating the kind of work environment that looks to be the future, right? So that would, look, Draper, Draper Startup House, you guys have, gone on an acquisition spree, the last 3 years, right? Dreamplex as well. And then lots of money have been poured into this area, right? Yeah, of course, real estate are still getting a lot of money, but, it looks like this is sort of like that inflection point whereby you're going to see that shift, in real estate business.
Just Bobby, just look at the money that's shifting, right? The investments, like who are making the investments? The most traditional players in the market, right? Cushman Wakefield invested into WeWork. CBRE bought a third of Industrious, right? Which is basically one of the largest ones in the US. A lot of institutional investors have been investing in these kind of, again, I don't call them co-working, but more like, workplace as a service, workplace experience as a service, these work platforms. The money is going there. People see that it's going there. It's kind of like how GM invested in Lyft, right? Because they know that, at some point they're not going to be making cars and everyone's going to buy a car. It's all going to be a platform. So that's where they want to put their money. That's where the future is. So I think I think it's all signals that also the more traditional players see that, in the future, workplace will just be an on-demand thing where you have a bunch of credits in your account that you spend somehow, either as a company or as an employee, and you just use it when you use it, which again is how we use everything right now. No one's buying CDs, or I think especially in Singapore, you want to really own a car unless you're really rich, right? You just with a push on the button, you have a car in front of your door and drives you to where you want to go, and then you don't have to park it, right? So that platformization.
Well, car in Singapore is a different thing, right? You're actually not really buying the car. You're just buying a piece of paper to.
Yeah, isn't it even worse?
And the prices are going up, crazy. If you check on all these platforms, the prices, COE, prices are actually going up, which is, social impact with such, dispersion of colleagues, right? Okay, so you don't have that social human integration. Okay, is that moving towards more screen time for the younger generation?
Surely, at least for me, I feel I'm not in the younger generation, but I think it's been
Well, we can always be young, but it's okay.
Yeah, I do miss the water cooler chats. On Fridays, office hours. I mean, if you're talking about like the impact on the connectedness of your friends and colleagues. I don't know about you. I do feel quite happy with my colleagues. A lot of my colleagues become my lifelong friends. I think it's just hard to establish those relationships virtually. It's nothing to laugh at, no one, nothing to talk about outside of the 1 hour scheduled meetings, right? So
Yeah, Bobby. So I'm right. I'm right with Pin. Like I like the physical interaction and the water cooler chats. Certainly, the parties and the happy hours. Trust me, I run a hospitality business, so it's something that I love and I enjoy doing. But sort of because the topic of today's call is really like remote first work culture. And so I kind of sort of like look at this from I like to bucket it in three categories. The first and foremost category, which sort of drives everything, is sort of like just world dynamics, because usually it's the dynamics of what's happening in the world that sort of dictates everything. It's not whether or not we like water cooler chats. It's sort of like what's happening in the world. We went from farming to factories to all working in cubicles to then having the internet, and so clearly there's some dynamics in the world that dictate how things are working. So the key sort of dynamics are risk, and risk is, of course, like we see with the pandemic. There's clearly going to be a lot more risk events that are going to happen, which is going to dictate how we work. So biological risks, fear, whatever. So there's like clearly world risk factors, which we didn't have before, which is that biologically pandemics can spread very, very quickly, very fast. So that's a dynamic that's going to shift the way we work. There's clearly economic dynamics in terms of outsourcing and margins. People can work from anywhere. You can have talent. There's interactions. There's also just more visibility, information knowledge. So those dynamics are very, very powerful. And also work that used to be very physical in nature are all becoming automated. And that's a huge dynamic that's going to shift the way the work culture is going to be. So number one, I see sort of global dynamics. Secondly, work culture, which is what we're talking about. How do you make bonds between coworkers and trust building and all those sort of real human interactions and human culture. And those things are also shifting because there are a lot of new ways that you can actually build team dynamics and culture without actually having to do that every single day at the water cooler. And there's new management techniques, and there's all sorts of new ways that the work culture is also changing. And then the thirdly, which Dan and Charles are talking about, is infrastructure. So whether it's co-working spaces or co-living spaces, the infrastructure is becoming a lot more decentralized, a lot more a service-oriented, pay-as-you-go kind of thing. But that infrastructure is a laggard. Infrastructure real estate doesn't drive work culture. Real estate doesn't drive global dynamics. It's a laggard. So I think ultimately the infrastructure, which is all the co-working spaces, that's going to be the last thing to change, as Dan mentioned. First and foremost is really going to be global dynamics. And I think those global dynamics are like very, very strong. And whether or not we like Ready Player One, it's coming. It's going to be here a lot faster than we want. And I guess the question is, like, I have two daughters. One is 3 and one is 9 months. And both of them were raised with an iPad and smartphones, right? I wasn't, but my kids are, and who knows what their kids are going to be raised with. And so I think these dynamics are more powerful than we can even fathom. And I think I'm not someone who is like, I'm a very optimistic person, but I think the metaverse is coming sooner than we think.
Yes, very good that you bring up all these points. So what I'm seeing is that we're going to have this start-stop of the economy very often. It's not a one-time thing whereby we have, for example, in Vietnam, a total lockdown, and then 3 months later we are good to go. But and given if you take a leaf out of what New Zealand has done recently, simply by one case happening, the whole country got shut down, and yet we have an increase in infections. So we're going to see this stop happening, and this is why I kind of titled it as remote first work culture, right? It's really not about accommodating remote work, rather, and what you talk about this big change is really about, are we moving to a point whereby remote work dictates real work? See, and it seems as though that's the direction that we're heading towards. It's not so much as employers, for example, tolerating people working remotely, but rather they have to look at it and say, all right, how am I going to build a company based on remote function?
Yeah, there's so many good examples, I think, of companies that are asking that exact question right now. I think it's kind of like identity crisis in a way, right? Because I think previously you could kind of say, come to the office and here we've designed something that kind of like that is our company culture, because that's where you meet the people, that's where you see our core values hanging on the wall, there's where you see some crazy art sculpture that somehow reflects what we stand for, blah blah blah, right? And now it's like, oh, everyone's working from home, so what does that mean for us as a company? They kind of have to actually go back to who are we, right? And then how would you then do that with your current workforce, with new team members you're bringing in? How do you get them into that company culture? How does a culture even evolve when people are not physically together, right? I think the other thing that's really interesting to think about a remote first world is that, like, what kind of loyalty would you even have to your employer? I mean, I'm not saying that because I'm working from home that I don't feel loyal to my company, but in a way, isn't it kind of like as easy as switching browser tabs to start a new job? If you can work for this company on your computer, can you not work for this company on your computer? Again, I'm not applying for a job here, but I think some of the companies like Unilever is testing with Glow.com to look into talent marketplace, right? Where still within Unilever, they say we have this kind of project which requires these kind of people, these kind of roles. And now let us match that against all the profiles of all the Unilever employees globally and get the dream team together for that specific project, right? Those people can be anywhere. So could at some point could that become kind of like the equivalent of driving for Uber and Lyft and Grab at the same time? Could you at some point just say, I'm going to fragment my time and I'm going to do 4 hours on this, 3 hours on this, 2 hours on this, right? Could it become fully on demand in that sense? Vikram is ready to have that kind of job. Or maybe he already has it.
Well, actually, Dan, I love this point you bring up. And I think this is really the key point of remote first work culture. And I think it comes into the first global dynamics piece that I was talking about. I agree with you. I think there's going to be a lot more entrepreneurs in the world. There's going to be a lot more solopreneurs in the world. There's going to be a lot more people starting their own businesses. The past of the big mega companies employing millions of people around the world, like the factory system, the Unilevers. I think a lot of that is breaking down because people now have the ability to become their own, be their own employers, whether it's through a lot of companies like Airbnb, Uber, but these are companies of the past, right? The companies of the future are going to be, how many more podcasters are there in the world because they can reach direct customers and consumers, right? How many more people are making videos? Pin, I saw that Lightspeed recently invested in what was the
Nas Daily?
Nas Daily, and that's a great example. Like all the people in the Nas Daily ecosystem, they're all entrepreneurs. They're all solopreneurs, and because the middleman is disappearing, who needs the CNBCs and the CNNs when you can have followers on Twitter or on YouTube and have direct access to your customers, to your audience. And I think because of that, remote work is going to become so much more powerful because there's going to be millions or more empowered individuals who are not going to have to go into an office and work at a company, but can be their own breadwinners. And I think that's a piece that a lot of people don't talk about, because that's a long tail. That's going to be a huge driving force in how remote work is going to be very, very, it's going to be a lot bigger than we think.
That's like, again, like Unilever did it internally as a talent marketplace, but that's basically platforms like Fiverr.com or Upwork, where you say, I have these kind of skills, this is what I can do for you. You kind of know how to promote yourself, and you just wait for the jobs to come in, and everyone kind of works as a freelancer or as an entrepreneur. That's pretty much already there, and you're seeing that obviously really rising. Now, question is everyone really ready to do that, right? Isn't there some kind of comfort into having a job, knowing what's going to happen to you in the next, 3, 6, 9, 12 months, having a career? I do say that, especially here in Vietnam, I do say that, again, we just ran a big research study about Gen Z and work in Vietnam. That whole idea of a career is kind of gone. They just want continuous development. They just want continuous improvement. They want to basically do something, learn something, move on to the next thing. If that's within the same company, great. If it's not, that's fine too. I'm sitting with them, every 3 months, basically saying, is your job still the right job for you? Because we risk losing them after 9 or 12 months if we don't do that. Right. So maybe if that whole idea of a career kind of disappears, if that's not something that people strive for anymore, then maybe then that kind of like platformization of matching kind of like, the skills with the needs will become even bigger. Yeah.
So, Pin,
I still like my job, but I still like to be.
Come on, you guys cannot talk about liking your jobs, all right? Because you guys chose what you guys do. So, so that's
we chose, but we might not like it.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
I
Come on,
feel
you can't not like what you choose to do. But so, Pin, my question to you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I feel like this is just gonna be. Well, I don't think most companies will go remote first. I think there's part of, especially the younger generation, that they think a lot more about their career holistically, precisely what Dan says, right? I want to be meeting mentors. I want to have personal relationship with them, right? And I just think the relationship component just can't be done virtually, or it's much better done in person, right? But and just going back to the question, I also feel like at the end of the day, remote or not will become another policy, right? No different from policies that people have in the past, like should we have unlimited vacation days? Should we have maternity policies? Should we have free lunch for everybody, right? And I think it's just going to be part of a certain culture, and some people will take a spectrum of it, I think, and they will just draw, and it's just free market forces will just draw people to the right companies, right? There are companies and virtual companies already, there are big tech organizations that are just completely virtual, and some people like that model. There are certain company that I just want to be in person. I think I manage better. I don't want to be. My space, my home don't have space. Or I simply think there should be a home and work divide, right? Just for me to walk out of my house, and that's when I'm working. When I walk back to my home, that's when I'm like just family time. I just think the remote piece would just become another HR policy that every CEO, every founder have to make a decision on.
Yeah, there was actually a great piece from the chief HR officer, the global CHRO for Twitter. She just wrote a great piece yesterday on Time, exactly about that. How basically, I think it was like in 2008, Jack wrote this email and he said, "P.S. I'm going to be working from home today because I always feel more productive." And then everyone reached out to her saying, "Oh, is there a new policy? Can we now work from home? Because Jack apparently is doing it." Yeah. And so from that moment on, they basically started experimenting with, what is the right kind of policy. And one of the things I really like that they said is that they actually did it with the people team first. They kind of let them experiment with some of these like ideas for policies. And then if it worked for them, then they would announce it to the rest of the company, then they would roll it out. But to your point, yeah, for those kind of companies, it's really like a really big kind of HR question about what do we allow? And again, companies are always thinking, especially in HR, you're always thinking about how can I be competitive versus, another venture fund? How can I be competitive versus another app, versus another creative agency? And this could be one of those ways. I think, again, the biggest thing, at least in Vietnam, that people are asking for, can I have more flexibility and kind of have more choice in how and where and how and when I work. That's the number one thing. So if you can offer that, and whether that's fully remote first or not, I think again goes back to what someone wants, what the employee wants.
Okay, so we are talking. So basically, all the five of us here, we are more, obviously leaning towards tech, and I think the tech sector is probably leading in terms of this whole remote culture, right? What about the 90% SMEs? Back to your question, Charles, when you talked about the corporations in Thailand, what about the 90% SMEs? How do you expect them to sort of make that kind of leap?
I think
And especially if they have to hire new, younger people who are looking at remote work as a distinct possibility.
Well, SME can really ride this trend, right? I mean, corporate is going to be a lot slower on, adopting remote work, and the policy that come with will be it'd be a little bit crazy. I know a company who come and ask me for help, like how can we monitor our employee working remotely from home? Is it okay to install a camera in their room and track every movement?
Keylogger.
That's crazy, right? So companies still have that mentality. Even if they're remote, they still want control, and that's a challenge. So if smaller company, they can offer this, right? And then they can also offer what you guys just said, not a career, but skill development. And they plug into strong and vibrant community that they feel connect to other people too, and then I mean it's more attractive, and also being, if they can also pay competitive to a lot of larger corporation too, that would be good. But we also need to understand that at least what we've been discussing in the HR circle in Thailand is that we believe in the future people are not going to have just one job anymore. We will have at least three. And I can work as a company employee, a founder of my own startup, a freelance, and so as a consultant at the same time, right?
But would that be tolerance by employers in the SME sector? I mean, in the tech, we kind of assume that you are doing, a lot of, especially the more established ones, employees, we kind of expect them to basically do some side gig, especially in Vietnam, right? I mean, they are like serialpreneurs in Vietnam, right? But what about SMEs? Are they able to look at that? Because typically when you have an employee in an SME, for example, and even if they were to be selling chewing gum after 6 p.m., that would be not well taken, well looked into, right? What about you doing your own gig like a startup?
I think SME just have to accept that it's the future, and whoever adopted first will get a lot of good people to help them out. I myself, I co-found a small SME with one of my employees, and they're still working in the company and they're doing fine. So, and everything is automated. So if they know how to use technology, it's not something that will be bad. Actually, better for everyone. Yeah.
Of course, I mean, if you talk about other things like manufacturing, then there's obviously not so much of a choice rather than a necessity to be on site, right? The factory and stuff like this. So with that thinking, Pin, in terms of your investment into companies, does your fund sort of have a maybe a change in how you look into investing? Do you look at more like decentralized learning, decentralized work, more of a SaaS enterprise, to kind of accommodate companies who are going remote?
Yeah, we definitely have that. I mean,
so better write down tips. Yeah.
We definitely have that as a theme, right? There's going to be more remote or some form of virtual working, right? Virtualization of work is definitely going to happen. With invest, and it's not just working. We think virtual events are also here to stay, right? In the past, when we have invested in a company called Hubilo, for example, that does virtual events management. How does virtual event in the marketing events or tech conferences look like in the future, right? Like it shouldn't look like what it is 2 years ago, which is everyone paying $1,000 to try to attend this conference and, try to find the sea of the person, a person in a sea of folks to connect, right? So we definitely have a theme of, the future of work, networking, playing. So that's definitely one theme that we're looking very closely at. Yeah, gaming's been, another big bust again, another big boom again. So yeah, I think virtualization of every interaction is definitely increasing.
Like what, NFT games? You think that's
Yeah, we're definitely looking at all of that as well. Yeah.
So Clubhouse kind of died, sort of. So do you see all these products, right? I mean, having some sort of a mini crescendo and then not, take off.
Well, I don't think Clubhouse died. I mean, I wouldn't opine too early if they died or not. I think at the end of the day, it takes, revision, and for me, I feel like it has not been revised as much as quickly as I had hoped Clubhouse would have, right? So I think then it just come down to service and product, that you're able to cater to your audience as they also look for more things and have more things bombarded at them, right? So I wouldn't take it just because the downloads hasn't gone up last year. That means people aren't looking for ways to listen to people discuss things online anymore, right? Yeah.
I think with Clubhouse, such an interesting example, right? Because in some ways, Clubhouse was a really interesting feature.
Yeah.
Just like how, Snapchat basically introduced stories, which now is in everything, right? You have Facebook stories, WhatsApp stories, I mean, even LinkedIn stories, Twitter stories. I think what Clubhouse then launched was a really interesting feature because for the first time, I could do this without having to worry about how I look. I thought it was a great invention. And then maybe they weren't able to capitalize on quickly building a strong community that wouldn't want to leave the platform with new features coming out, Android coming very soon. Maybe they weren't able to do it, but now you see Twitter Spaces. I just log on to Facebook. They now have audio rooms, and Slack has huddles, right? So the format is still there. So it maybe just hasn't really happened within the company, but I think the format they introduced actually makes a lot of sense for me to have 5 people in a Slack channel and click one button and I'm on an audio call with them. We also use another one called Jam, and you just kind of like quickly have a couple of people together and you're talking as if you were in the office. I think that really speaks to the virtualization of work, as Khun Pin was just saying. This idea of like, how would you replicate what otherwise you would have done in the office, and you do it in the virtual world?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I'm testing out Jam as well. Right?
Yes, we love Jam.
Yeah. So today,
it's become a verb, let's jam.
I mean,
when
today,
we're typing too much, let's jam.
We talk about remote work, right? And this is pretty much by force, right? And we think about Zoom, but then it's such a hassle to kind of set up Zoom for everyone, and then you don't know how many people are there, right? And there are certain behaviors, whatever, right? So there has to be something which is more seamless.
Yeah.
While if all 5 of us are in an office on a day, Monday through Friday, that's different, right? I mean, we still have our own room or cubicles or whatever. But then to say, hey, you know what? Now we are working remote. Let's turn Zoom on for 24 hours or for 8 hours. That is, creepy, right? I think, right? In that sense, is what Charles is saying, that his friend is asking him whether should he install a camera in the home, right? That's kind of creepy. Okay, on the subject of technology, all right, and now that talking to you guys is just fantastic, right? And 1 hour has just gone by.
Oh,
so yeah, so to wrap up, all right, you already said Jam, so you can't say Jam again, but name the one tool that has helped you a lot in remote work and why. Let's start with Pin.
Well, Zoom, I think it's the obvious one. Are we not allowed to talk about obvious ones? Well, Well, actually,
Are you like zooming? Are you like zooming 8 hours nonstop?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's my
Okay.
life.
Okay. All right.
Actually, one that actually worked out really well for me was Kahoot. I think it's just, more we do internal stuff, and we want people to participate, and I found that tool to be quite interactive and getting people to engage with the presentation and things that we're doing a bit more. So
Really, you like Kahoot?
yeah,
All right.
I really like
All right.
it.
Off channel, I'm going to refer you a startup.
Okay, sure.
Hey, refer to us too. I want something like that too.
Okay, Charles.
Well, my team we've been using ClickUp since the pandemic, and it really helped us organize our work. And we have a few people who's like evangelists. So whoever new coming to the company, they would just go and try to get them to be able to use this effectively. So that's good for people to know what everyone is doing, and keep everyone accountable, but not being too intrusive. Yeah, so ClickUp has been working well for us. Yeah.
Vikram.
ClickUp, yeah, Vikram.
The tool that I like the most that we use in the company, we use 3 tools. We use Slack, of course, for communication. And we use Notion for internal database. And of course, we don't use Zoom that much, but we use Google Meets because our email is Gmail, and it's just easier to for small calls to just it's automatically on there. I would say those are the 3 tools that we use a lot. But Notion is certainly
Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah,
Notion, isn't that's like the closest to me? It's like the closest replication to really working with someone. And the amount of customization that you can do, according to your own imagination. Yeah, Notion has been fantastic. Yeah. Okay, Dan.
So we've just gone through pretty much the entire suite of collaboration tools. So I'll throw in something else that's not about collaboration. Actually, for me, again, a really big part of what we do, because a lot of this is not about the physical infrastructure. It's really much more about culture and, like how companies need to change over time. So a lot of what we do really sits more in the HR world than in the real estate world. And from an HR perspective, one of the tools that I have found really, really helpful, we've been using it for a while, but I think in this time even more, is Office Vibe. Very similar to like a 515 or similar tools like that, where basically it sends you one question every week on Friday. And based on your answer, which is fully anonymous, I basically get a dashboard of all of my employees, and I can see in real time how people are doing. So I get a sense for not only how are they doing generally, but where are things starting to become difficult. I think more than anything, or more than any time, like companies really need to listen more to employees. And so to be able to do that in an automated way, there's a lot of science behind it, and to get that kind of like very data-driven view into how's the team doing, where do we need to improve, where are we falling short, what should I address first, has been really, really helpful, especially in this time. The other feature it has is this sort of like, it has an inbox type thing where you can basically just like type something that you're worried about or a question you want to ask. And again, you can therefore interact with our team, with the management team, without having to do it under your own name. And it actually has become kind of this thing that people call the confession booth, where they kind of like would say the things that they normally never would say. And it's just been incredible, because basically you have this conversation that otherwise you wouldn't have. And you actually find out what isn't working for people. And then we can obviously then address that and make it a better workplace for them.
What's the name?
Well, we
Office
use
Vibe.
Office Vibe, but there's Friday.com. There's a lot of tools like it, but we like Office Vibe.
Well, now that Dan mentioned, can also give a shout out to Thai version of that called Happily. We did the same
Happily?
thing, and Happily, they've been fantastic with help me understand, getting feedback from employee, and me will give feedback to my employee effectively. So they've been
I like the
fantastic.
name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Check it out.
All right.
I don't.
Cool. Yeah. So in summary, we have Vikram saying that metaverse is where we are heading, and we are heading there fairly soon. And then we have Pin saying that no, we'll still go back to the office and have that human connection. And then we have Charles and Dan saying that, nah, let's decentralize them, but yet connect them together. All right. And the tools to help all of them to handle this will be ClickUp, Kahoot, Notion, Office Vibe, and Happily out of Thailand. Right? So with this, thank you very much, speakers, Vikram Bharati, Pin, Charles, and Dan for joining me on this 1 hour session to talk about remote work, remote first work cultures. It's been really insightful. I've certainly learned quite a few things myself. And hopefully, you come down the line, you come join me for, other crucial talking points on other subject matters. So guys, thank you very much. Have a nice weekend coming.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.